Hi, people. So I just want to say a little bit more on the passing of Matthew Perry. I made an initial video about this, and yeah, it got to me more than the usual celebrity death. Um, but I want to talk a little bit more specifically about his type of humor and also not lessons but observations about his life in terms of his life as a famous person and what lessons there are, what observations are within that. As I see it, this isn't gospel truth, it's just the way I see it. I'm going to just read out from the Times. This is from a couple of days ago, October the 30th. Specifically, they do a good write up here in their editorial piece. So I'm just going to read out from this. It's not too long, so bear with me. I think they sum it up well. With Matthew Perry's death, the world has lost a decade-defining comedic talent. And this is the piece. It's been nearly 20 years since the last episode of Friends, the television sitcom about six 20-somethings living in New York, aired. With its brick-like phones, surfeit of denim and curtains hairstyles, the show instantly evokes the 1990s. Although it went well into the 2000s as well, it should be remembered. But actually, if you see the first episode and the last episode, there's quite a difference in the styles and so on. American milieu in which it was conceived, evokes the 1990s American milieu in which it was conceived, but its appeal has only been very much wider, has been very much wider. It is a favourite not only of the generations who were navigating the pitfalls of adult friendship when it aired, so that's Generation X, um, but also of millennials, that's myself, some of whom were but babes in arms, and Generation Z, who were not even that. Well, we millennials are a big generation. Basically, the time that Friends aired, I'm interrupting here just to say this little point. 1994, September 1994 to September 2004. September is the month of my birthday, so my basic from the ages of 9 to 19 for me. So yeah, I could justifiably say I grew up with Friends. Um, I'm an older millennial, so I fit right into that period of, and obviously Generation X as well, who were more like the ages of the actors, um, very much associated with it. But I think it's a mark of the impact of Friends that even younger people, Generation Z, are looking at Friends, recognize it. The death of Matthew Perry, famous for playing Chandler Bing in Friends, therefore marks the end of an era for many. As one of the friends once put it, being funny is Chandler's thing. It was Friend's thing too. He was the epicenter of the show's wit. When any character appears to take themselves a shade too seriously, Chandler's cutting riposte is never far behind. Overhearing his friend Ross, a paleontologist, testily explain to a colleague that Australopithecus was never fully erect, Chandler interjects, maybe he was nervous. Friends fans will know these episodes. Watching a home video from childhood of a rather heavier Monica, who insists that the camera adds £10, he inquires with a quizzical inflection, so how many cameras are actually on you? When the rhythmically challenged Joey asks, when was 1990? Chandler warns with concern, you have to stop the Q-tip when there's resistance. Behind all the sarcasm was an irresistible cocktail of charm, affection, and lashings of self-doubt. In that respect, Perry, harried for much of his adult life by addictions and other demons, was not so different from his character. Though Matthew Perry is gone, Chandler will delight audiences for many years yet, and he will always be the defining comedic voice of a generation. I mean, even in a funny show where all the characters are funny, Chandler was the Joker of the pack. And, I honestly think had any of the actors passed away, it would be big news. It would be a similar sort of outpouring. But there's something particularly ironic in the fact that he was the Joker of the pack and he was the youngest. I believe Lisa Kudrow's the oldest. But there's another piece I want to highlight here by Sarfraz Mansour, who may have had the longest ever interview with Perry. And that headline says it all. This is the interviewer. And by the way, that editorial, they don't name the individual journalist, it's just the Times editorial. He asked me for a cheeseburger and told me how lonely he was. Basically, this paints a picture of quite a sad figure, really. This is a tragic irony. A man who gave so many laughs to so many people, was himself quite a tragic figure. Now, in some ways, Perry had a very privileged life. He was in a successful sitcom. He got what he wanted. He wanted to be famous, and he certainly was that. Some would say that he got what he wanted, but he is not the only person to fall into the trappings of fame. There's other, what they say, it's lonely at the top. And yet the irony was Perry shouldn't have been alone. The other five cast members, leading cast members, would have had similar levels of fame. And it just shows like I never realised his addiction was so bad, actually. I thought it was kind of a period during the production of Friends. I didn't realise it was something that plagued his whole life. Uh, excuse me. But it shows his professionalism that, I mean, who knows, maybe they had several takes, but you couldn't tell in the shows that he was an addict. You know, other people troubled by that problem, other celebrities, sometimes it showed with Perry, whether it was professionalism, whether they just done several takes, I don't know, but it never showed. Although he said himself his appearance, if he had a moustache, it would be a particular point. He would be on opiates. If he was overweight, it was his alcohol phase. If he was underweight, he would be coming off that. Um, and right enough, his physical appearance did change throughout the 10 years, probably more than any of the others. This is a poignant bit in Mansour's piece. When our dinner was over, the bill had been settled, we were about to go our separate ways. Me to my wife and young daughter, and Perry to the casino. I asked him if I should believe everything he had said about wanting to settle down and have a family. Being pretty truthful with you, he said. You're getting the real me. Later, when friends asked me what Matthew Perry was like, I was really like I reminded them of the scene in the first series of Friends where Phoebe is dating Roger, the psychologist. You're so funny, he says to Chandler. I wouldn't want to be there when the laughter stops. I guess that's where we all are now. And I must admit, watching episodes, it's a little bit of a sad feeling, with him gone. I mean, people, he was 54, it was too young. People die all the time. But I think the thing about this is, this is why I would describe Perry's humour as Chandler, because remember, he improvised a lot of the lines. It was sarcasm without being excessively cruel. It could be, you know, cheeky but never too smart arse. It was it was hiding an insecurity, and this is why it reflected so much with his own life. Apparently when he was auditioning for the part of Chandler, he prayed, "Just make me famous," which sounds really shallow on the surface, but I think it was a man who was just longing to be wanted. Really, I mean, given his background, and it's just the fallout from his parents' divorce, and if anyone summarise the tragic comic, it's Matthew Perry. It's not the only one. Robin Williams, of course, was had similar problems with depression and other issues, and there's other comics who would say. I think Charlie Chaplin probably did. It seems to go with the territory. But the thing I like about Matthew Perry's humour, yeah, sometimes it was a bit cheeky. Chandler he could be a smart arse. Let's face it, but it was never excessively nasty. And if you know the show, Chandler was a caring guy. He had a genuinely romantic streak. He was caring for his friends. He could be sensitive in a good way, um, and it was impossible not to like him. Even though at times he could be a little bit pathetic and a little bit, he used that humor as a masking device. But Perry came up with a lot of that stuff, and the sad thing was that I think probably more than any of the other actors, it reflected his own life. I mean, I don't know if Rachel Green is Jennifer Aniston, if Ross Geller is David Schwimmer, and so on. Um, I know, for example, Lisa Kudrow is not Phoebe Buffay, so maybe more than any of the others, um, that is true of Matthew Perry being close to Chandler Bing. Although in that interview he did say that Perry was darker than Chandler. Um, but for me, it's there's a message in all of this. Fame isn't what people think, and I don't think you can ever, no matter how much you want it. I don't think if you ever become famous, you can ever be fully prepared. Obviously, I'm not in that position. and the vast majority of us aren't. But fame is tough. I mean, you just had to look at the scene of his death where the paparazzi were clustering outside already, thrusting their cameras into his parents as they arrived. That's fame. And obviously, Perry found that harder than the other cast members. But it's not all sad. This is a man. I hope he knew in his lonelier moments that he did give joy to lots of people. And actually, he said, if I could find this, how would you like to be remembered? If I could find this, as someone who, there's a lot of pieces on this story. Maybe it was in the main piece, but he said he wanted to be someone who, yeah, here we go. As a guy who lived life, lived well, and helped people, he said, the running into me was a good thing and not something bad. Well, from all the interviews that have been given from the millions of fans, I think he achieved that. And of course, it's tragic that his life was so blighted by addiction. And it's not that he didn't try. He went into rehab. He did really try, but it's an awful thing. Um, my own take, incidentally, on that, I do think if someone has an alcohol problem, they have to do what they can to address it. But it is a disease. It is something it plagues people. In terms of criminality, Perry had a famous interview with Peter Hitchinson. He said it shouldn't be criminalised. I agree, broadly speaking, unless someone is using violence to get alcohol or another addiction. That's where I would diverge. So I don't know what Perry's view on that was, if he accepted that there is that component, where, some drunks would get violent. Now, with Perry, it wasn't like that. As far as I know, it was more a depressive masking thing. I haven't heard any, for example, memories that he was an obnoxious drunk, that he was violent, or I think he was sad and lonely. But I just hope he knew. I just hope he knew that he brought joy to many, many people. Um, he said at the Friends reunion that he would physically sweat if he didn't get laughs. But there was also a poignant thing at that reunion a few years ago. I saw a little clip yesterday that was kind of sad. It showed the five actors meeting, and then Perry was late, and he kind of came in the door to the studio, and there was kind of light behind him, and there was something a little bit ghostly about it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but there's been some beautiful tributes. There was one, I don't know who the artist was, but it showed Perry and the late Michael James Tyler, who played, or James Michael Tyler, I should say, who played Gunther, and they were kind of going to heaven with the Central Perk logo, and it was poignant. But I do believe that a great comedian, their talent lives on. And Friends is going nowhere. This is a show that remains arguably as popular as it was when it aired. I mean, merchandise still sells in Britain. I mean, it's incredible. It really was. I would say Friends had a bigger impact in its 10 years. That's a reasonably long run, but there's been shows that have ran much longer, I would say, have had less of an impact than Friends. That's my thoughts. I mean, I don't like cruel humor, but the thing with Perry was it was sarcastic without being excessively cruel, and it was never mean spirited. And the joke was it was always masking his insecurity, something that was itself referenced in the show. Whereas you get these comics, that just have a really nasty streak, that are, stand-up comics they use. I mean, Perry never used, for example, tragedy or disaster in his one-liners. I was always sort of masking his own insecurities. And yeah, it wasn't straight laced, it wasn't dull, it wasn't, tame. It could be edgy, it could be cheeky. I think it was great humour. I think all the cast were funny, but particularly Perry. It's a sad thing. But, Friends will live on, and Chandler Bing's character will definitely live on. And that's Matthew Perry's legacy. It's a very good legacy.